3 hours later, I'm back. Let's continue. I don't think it's working. I don't think it's working. What am I doing wrong? PC audio, properties. Oh, yep, that's it. Thought I worked that out before I started. Never mind. Let's continue.
Most of his content is focused on gaming and pop culture, and PewDiePie's presentation style relies heavily on silly voices and wacky hijinks.
I would never incite violence. I'm not racist, of course, but I freaking hate crab people.
PewDiePie has been described as a Nazi by some, but the over-the-top, zany delirium of his videos are a far cry from the overtly intimidating imagery of neo-Nazis and white supremacists that I grew up with. To be clear, PewDiePie has said and done things that are unmistakably racist. He casually used the N-word during a live stream. He promoted an openly racist and anti-Semitic YouTube channel. Perhaps...
Which one? Is it, what's it called? It's been so long, I can't even remember the name of the show that he promoted. Man. What was that guy's name? The guy who did the video about, what was it, Steven Universe? ER, that was his name. God, that was ages ago. And I don't think that guy is openly racist and anti-Semitic. I think he dog whistles a lot. But I don't know. I haven't seen any evidence that the guy is openly racist and anti-Semitic. If that is who we're talking about.
The N-word during a live stream. He promoted...
Yeah. Nope. He doesn't even show. He doesn't even show who he's talking about. He just shows an article writing about it.
An openly racist and anti-Semitic YouTube channel. Perhaps most infamously, he did a stunt where he commissioned Indian men on the website Fiverr to hold up signs that read...
I thought you said that he did stuff that was unambiguously racist and anti-Semitic. This is definitely not unambiguously racist. This is clearly just him trying to be funny by seeing like what is the most horrible thing I could get these people to do for $5. Not racist.
Death to all Jews.
Sorry.
I like the editing.
Now, in PewDiePie's defense,
racist.
He has apologized for his most egregious deeds and words, and
acknowledging, like, part of the joke is acknowledging that that's a fucked up thing to say. And so it's like about the surprise of like, if I tell them to do that, will they actually do it? And then they actually do it. And he's like, oh my God, they actually did it. That's not racist, obviously. God, like, even a fucking baby can figure that out.
It's easy to write this stuff off as small potatoes. Heated gaming moments, bad jokes that were carried out without much forethought, innocent mistakes. He's a YouTuber after all, and...
The saying the N-word thing, though, that was definitely racist. I will admit, I don't think it was motivated out of a racial reason, though. I just think it was a racist thing to say.
Entertainer, not the president of the United States, not a journalist, not a political activist. His channel exists to amuse young people, not engage with them politically. He'd tell you that himself, and I'm sure that's what he honestly believes. And entertainers making off-color jokes or blurting out racist slurs in heated moments are nothing new. Back in 2006, when I was a young dude, Michael Richards, who played Kramer on Seinfeld, which was basically the PewDiePie of the 90s, called an audience member the N-word during a stand-up comedy act.
Yeah, that was racist.
It was a big deal, and his career never really recovered, but nobody accused him of inspiring racist violence. So what's different today? Is this a case of SJWs and cultural Marxists reading too deeply into a problem that isn't really that serious? Or is there truth to the idea that PewDiePie's actions may have contributed to what happened in New Zealand?
I just don't see how PewDiePie did much to contribute to it, personally. I think that it's more the case that PewDiePie was very popular at the time, and because of his sense of humor and how he often made fun of SJWs, you know, certain people in that crowd, in that right-wing crowd, took to him and thought he was pretty funny. Thought he was pretty cool. I don't really think that if PewDiePie didn't exist, anything would be better, is what I'm saying. I think all this stuff... Like, I even think that the Christchurch shooter would have done it whether PewDiePie were a factor or not. Death to all Jews. Hitler was right. Yeah, but he wasn't a stochastic terrorist. That's the thing. It's like, this is very much a blown out of proportion claim that because PewDiePie appealed to the alt-right, that means that therefore he bears responsibility for all of the actions of the alt-right? No. For all of the terrorism of the alt-right? I mean, you've got to be a fucking retard to think that. But this guy who, you know, seems to have a pretty high opinion of himself and his own intelligence, has this whole channel devoted to promoting Marxism, somehow is just a buffoon when it comes to understanding this stuff. Either that or he's being dishonest. I think the latter is probably more likely, you know? I think it's very likely that people like Non-Compete have an enemies list, and they say, oh, PewDiePie is on the enemies list because he didn't do enough to distance himself from the alt-right, and he appealed too much to the alt-right, and so because of that, I'm going to slander him, and I'm going to put more blame on him than any reasonable person would, any non-biased person would, to punish him, basically. I think that's all this is. I think this is just a hit job from a disgruntled enemy. Yeah, and so the claim, therefore, is that PewDiePie was trying to cause terrorism with these videos. Like, this is like verging on defamation here. This is not okay to just be saying, I mean, this is like, he's kind of doing the same thing that he's accusing PewDiePie of, almost. He's like not directly saying, but he's indirectly saying. I mean, he hasn't yet made the direct claim that PewDiePie is a stochastic terrorist, but he's doing everything possible to imply it.
Individual stochastic terrorists from taking personal responsibility for acts of violence. Okay, this is all starting to sound a little abstract, so let's take a look at how fascist stochastic terrorists are operating in practice through what I call the PewDiePie pipeline.
The beauty pipeline. Let's go.
As I'll explain in more detail later, I don't want to focus too much on PewDiePie alone as an individual, because this is a system of violence that's bigger than any one personality, even one with 90 million subscribers. But I'm still going to call it the Pewdie Pipeline because it highlights how seemingly innocent influencers like YouTubers and comedians are contributing to stochastic terrorism. Before we can begin to understand how edgy jokes lead to full-on acts of terrorism, we first need to examine some sociological and psychological processes that are leveraged by stochastic terrorists. The pyramid of violence was first developed by social scientists to explain how sexual discrimination leads to sexual violence in our society. These same social processes are used by stochastic terrorists, so it's easy to adapt the pyramid to model the continuum of behaviors that lead to acts of violence. In our pyramid of stochastic violence, the base represents behavior that is very common and relatively benign. As we move up the pyramid, the behavior becomes less common but more violent. As individuals move up through the levels of the pyramid, they are spurred on by the behavior of individuals below and inspired by the activity of individuals above. So let's work our way up through the pyramid and see exactly how stochastic terrorists function in our society. Stage 1. Attitudes and beliefs. At the bottom of the pyramid are attitudes and
I don't
beliefs.
think you can call this stuff at the bottom of the pyramid stochastic terrorism. I think that's a little bit too strong of a word. I understand you can say that this stuff is on the same spectrum as stochastic terrorism, but I think you have to go like pretty off the pyramid to get to that level.
Phenomena that nearly all of us have internalized to some extent or another. These are things like stereotypes and harmful assumptions that are difficult to avoid in our society. Here are just some examples of racist attitudes and beliefs that nearly all of us have internalized to some extent or another. Black people are more likely to be criminals, Muslims are more likely to be terrorists, gay people are more likely to be promiscuous. Some of these attitudes and beliefs are so deeply embedded in our subconscious minds that they're borderline.
That's kind of true. I don't know about the Muslims being terrorists thing, but like black people being more likely to be criminals, that's true. Gay people being more likely to be promiscuous, I mean, have you never been on Grindr? I don't know. I think that might be true too. It's difficult to say, though. No, it's not difficult. I think it's true. I think I'm going to stake my claim there. That's my guess that it's true. But he's not going to investigate those claims, though, is he? He's just going to say them as if they're just, oh, yeah, everyone knows that stereotypes aren't true. But wait a minute. Do we know that? Have you actually investigated this? Have you done analysis of the data on this? Because I don't know, like, what are the odds that every stereotype just happens to not be true? Like, doesn't that seem unlikely? Like, why would people always pass around these ideas if none of them had any basis in reality at all?
Borderline instinctive. For example, a lot of white men become very uncomfortable if they see a black man with a white woman. Heterosexuals often get upset by gay men sharing public affection. Many of us tend to be overly suspicious of Muslim-presenting men at airports and train stations. These are all symptoms of very subtle but very pervasive biases. Every single one of us holds implicit biases like these, whether we realize it or not, whether we want to or not. If we're willing to recognize that we have these kinds of implicit biases, we can try to identify them and minimize their effects. But if left unchecked, these discriminatory attitudes and beliefs will quickly manifest, moving us up to the next tier on the pyramid of violence. Stage 2.
Boom.
Microaggressions.
Microaggressions
are subtle actions that cause harm to marginalized or vulnerable people. In many cases, microaggressions are completely unintentional. They're called microaggressions because they're so subtle that we can't even tell that they're there if we don't know what we're looking for or how to look for them. Microaggressions can manifest in words or actions. Examples include things like assuming ethnic minorities such as Asian Americans are foreign-born and saying things like, "Wow, you speak good English." Locking your car doors when a black man walks by, casually using terms and phrases that are discriminatory, such as Indian giver, that's so gay, or I Jewed him down. The list goes on.
Okay, but I say stuff like that all the time. Especially that's so gay. I use gay to mean bad. Actually, I never used to when I was a kid. Everyone around me did when I was a kid, but I never did. I guess maybe because, I don't know, I didn't see being gay as necessarily, like, all that funny or whatever. But I guess now I find being gay funny. I find homosexuality hilarious now. And so I often say things are gay to make fun of them these days. In a way I never used to do. I've gotten less woke as I've gotten older. Isn't that great? I've become less mature, supposedly.
On and on, but I trust you get the point. Microaggressions like these indicate that discriminatory attitudes are present, and these unconscious biases are...
I guess when I was a kid, I felt that, I felt bad for people who were gay. So I didn't see what was so funny about calling something gay back then. Because I was like, wasn't that just like mean to the people who are afflicted with this condition? But now I just think it's hilarious to be gay, so...
bubbling to the surface and might be a little bit less than unconscious. A person who commits microaggressions frequently and without any resistance from peers will become increasingly comfortable.
After 3 hours, I am back.
Engaging in harmful, discriminatory behavior and speech, which makes it much more likely to move up to the next tier on the pyramid. Stage 3, verbal expression. As individuals become more comfortable expressing discriminatory attitudes, they begin testing the waters with jokes and stereotypical or even flagrantly bigoted statements about others. They may begin to harass others.
Okay, but see, here's where I think this pyramid is bullshit, because there are two different kind of motivations here. You have the dog whistle and you just have the joke. In the case of PewDiePie, he was joking. In the case of someone else, maybe ER, I don't know. I don't know anything about that guy. Maybe he was dog whistling. But there's a difference between the two. You can't lump them in the same category because they're completely different things. A joke is something that's, not reflective. Or often sometimes the joke is that it's not reflective of someone's actual opinion. That we all recognize that this is wrong, and therefore it's funny because it's wrong. And then a dog whistle is when you do that, but you're only pretending that it's a joke. The kind of the issue is like, it's funny because it's true, or it's like, am I joking? Am I not? Like, that's part of the joke too. So those are very different things. It is quite funny to be gay indeed. It really is quite a lark. Yeah. I don't know. I love a good gay joke. Like that movie with Robin Williams and Billy Crystal, Father's Day. Bad movie. Not very good at all. But like the best parts of that movie were all the gay jokes. Because that movie did have a lot of gay jokes and they were pretty funny.
Especially online where they can remain more anonymous and there are fewer social repercussions. They're likely to begin surrounding themselves with people who share their prejudices so that they can make mean-spirited jokes and have prejudicial conversations without social consequences. They'll consume media that reinforces their prejudices, making them feel more confident and justified in their bigotry. This stage is particularly important because it's where bigotry externalizes and individuals begin to do intentional harm to marginalized people. As individuals move through the verbal expression stage, they're likely to follow similar patterns of development. Verbal expression includes humor, and that's how it often begins. This is where we meet highly popular influencers like PewDiePie, JonTron, and even Joe Rogan.
Europe has problems.
Now, PewDiePie is not verbally expressing racist opinions. He's never done that. He's never fucking done that, you idiot.
Definitely do. And whenever you have people from one culture that immigrate into another culture and they're disenfranchised and poor, and they have really, I'm going to keep going with it, and they also have a really restrictive, fucked up culture that they're coming from, and they want to impose that culture on the people that live in Germany or wherever, and they want women to start wearing long dresses, and they treat them like they're whores if they don't. That's all fucking real dangerous. They're from a different part of the world, and it's a part of the world that hasn't changed much in a long time. If you want people to be free and you want people to have the ability to integrate into a more free culture like America is, you also have to be honest about what the consequences are. And you have to be honest about what kind of culture they're coming from. And as soon as you talk about that, you get labeled an Islamophobe.
Humor can serve many social functions. But
for one thing, that wasn't humor. That was just him being real. Second, like, pretending that Joe Rogan is wrong doesn't actually solve any of these problems. My guy, like, you can't just put your fucking hands over your eyes and pretend that people from an extreme right-wing culture with backward social values coming to a Western country in droves is not going to sometimes cause some social issues. Like, for fuck's sake, grow the fuck up, you pussy-ass liberal. Like, I just don't know what these people are expecting to happen. Like, like just expecting this shit to go away by saying no, like being in denial. It doesn't work like that. You gotta face the facts. Joe Rogan was right.
In an environment of stochastic terrorism, it's initially used to normalize bigoted ideas and desensitize people to harmful and abusive language.
No, okay, this didn't work. I'm gonna take this off now.
When PewDiePie tries to make a joke out of the phrase "death to all Jews," he's normalizing not just insensitive but openly aggressive anti-Semitism.
No, actually, the joke is that it's not normal. It wouldn't have been a funny joke if it were normal. If the implication were, oh yeah, this is an okay thing to say. The reason, like, look what he's doing. Look at his body language. He's got his eyes wide open. That's a universal sign of surprise. He's got his hand covering his mouth, which is a universal sign of surprise. The joke is that he's surprised that they actually did this, that he told them to do something outrageously offensive and they actually did it. The joke wouldn't work if he were normalizing it. Like, why do I have to explain this?
And desensitizing his audience to incredibly harmful rhetoric. Then, when he uses his platform to promote overtly anti-Semitic videos or fascist books, he's escalating his fans even farther through the pipeline of stochastic terrorism. It's a 1-2 punch. First, desensitize with humor, then push fans to think videos or fascist books.
Fascist books? What, like Yukio Mishima? A novelist? I mean, he likes Mishima's novels. I don't know if that counts as promoting fascist books. If he were like, hey guys, there's this book that I read called Mein Kampf. You should check it out. It's got a lot of good insights about life and the world. Like, if he said that, then I'd be like, okay, fair enough. But saying that he enjoys the novels of Yukio Mishima, who, by the way, was not a, like, niche writer in his day. He was very popular in Japan. Saying that he likes his books. I don't really get what's so wrong about that. Like, if you actually watch his video that he made about Yukio Mishima, at no point in that video does he say that he liked Mishima's novels because of, like, fascist reasons.
Escalating his fans even farther through the pipeline of stochastic terrorism. It's a 1-2 punch. First, desensitize with humor, then push fans to more overtly racist content and ideas. Edgy humor primes the pump so that fans of this kind of comedy become much less likely to be turned off by more overtly prejudiced figures like Stefan Molyneux and Paul Joseph Watson and Laura Southern. A key point is that none of these jokes exist in a vacuum. When an edgy comedian repeats a racist concept for a cheap laugh, it makes it easier for a more seriously prejudiced political propagandist to push their bigoted agenda. And on the sidelines, at all times, there are the memes. Ah yes, the memes, the chans, forums like Stormfront, edgelord Discord servers. There are a lot of unsavory corners of the internet where virulent and aggressively prejudiced memes run wild. While YouTubers and public figures are normalizing verbal expression of violent rhetoric from above, masses of internet trolls in these spaces are shoving individuals along through the pipeline from below. Racist memes and edgy humor quickly build up into a toxic quagmire of hate speech where vulnerable people become rapidly and increasingly desensitized. Spending time in these online spaces facilitates the process of stochastic terrorism as individuals compete with each other to see who can produce the most edgy.
I mean, I understand complaining about people like Lauren Southern and Stefan Molyneux. Like, that's fair enough. They deserve the criticism. But PewDiePie is, you know, maybe a little bit adjacent in a cultural sense to those people. You know, he's not a totally foreign entity to them. But he's done nothing to actually contribute to this rhetoric. All he's done is, you know, every once in a while, you know, kind of slightly meme on some of these issues. Like when he reviewed the Respect Women meme, you know? I mean, that's the most of what he'll do. He'll invite Ben Shapiro on to host meme review, you know? That's it. I don't think that's a big deal. You know, you got to look at it, I think, less from a position of analyzing PewDiePie's reach and more look at it from analyzing PewDiePie's intentions and actions. Because anyone with the kind of reach that PewDiePie has is going to naturally have, you know, influence. But I think if you look at his influence, it's been mostly positive. In fact, he's been one of the few actually wholesome and positive voices on YouTube, especially lately with, you know, if you look at his family vlogs that he does, I mean, the dude is living the dream. He's living in Japan with a happy family. He's like, he had the happy ever after ending already in his 30s. And he seems to be quite, you know, for the most part, responsible about it. He's not always getting up to shenanigans like the Paul brothers. He's not starting drama all the time like Ethan Klein. He's being a good person. So I don't know, before you go on getting all butthurt about him being adjacent to certain right-wing meme cultures on the internet, you know, think about the bigger picture. What is he actually contributing to YouTube? I think it's good stuff. Yeah, no drama whoring. What happened to my PC audio thing? Oh, there it is. Sorry, the sound cut out for a minute because I pressed the space bar, and you can't do that on OBS. So stupid.
Like the Nazi flag without a swastika. That's all you need to know about that.
The only thing on a Nazi flag is a swastika. So what's a Nazi flag without a swastika?
Great pains are taken to ensure plausible deniability and to play mind games with the
Nazi
public at
flag
large.
without a swastika is the reverse of a Japanese flag.
Memes
That's
and
what
other
it
tools
is.
that give this kind of cover to prejudice are invaluable to stochastic terrorists. The dog whistle is another tool of concealment. Dog whistles are political statements that are hidden in plain sight so that only members of the in-group can identify them. An important historical example of...
I've noticed that so far he's given like one example of PewDiePie doing something he doesn't like, which is the death to all Jews thing. That's pretty much it. He showed him in a British Army officer uniform watching Hitler videos and telling a couple of Indian guys to write death to all Jews on Fiverr. In this 12 minutes so far, we've had 2 examples of PewDiePie doing naughty things.
Dog whistle politics is the Southern strategy.
Now, I get it. I'm bad at coming up with examples for things. That's like one of my least favorite things about discourse is when someone's like, give me an example. And I'm like, ugh, I Gotta like dig through my memory vault, my Swiss cheese memory vault, to come up with some example that illustrates perfectly what I'm talking about. So I get it, but like, if this is the kind of point you want to make, I'd expect, something, convincing. That was an Anzac uniform. There you go.
Which was a Republican political party election strategy used during the civil rights era to increase political support among white voters in the South by appealing to their racism. Southern strategists did not use openly racist language when appealing to racists. Instead, they used race-baiting dog whistles like forced busing, states' rights, and other phrasing that was clearly coded as racist to the target audience, while remaining vague enough to leave room for plausible deniability.
No, they pretty much said racist shit. They were like, segregation today, segregation tomorrow. I mean, what's that supposed to mean? The dude wanted segregation. So, no. They weren't dog whistling. They were pretty exact with, what they were talking about. Sometimes they were more along the dog whistling edge, but like, I don't know. Like sometimes when you don't even expect them to be, like David Duke running for president in the Nazi Party was like, we already have systemic racism in America. It's called affirmative action. It's like, who do you think you're kidding? You're running with the Nazi Party. Like, give me a break.
Dog whistles have gotten a lot more sophisticated and opaque since the days of the Southern strategy. We might refer to newer
The couched language is used in the North. Fair enough.
Forms of alt-right dog whistling as the Lauren Southern strategy, as modern white supremacists like Lauren Southern have developed sophisticated rhetoric that coats their vicious racism in a veneer of respectability. No longer do they call themselves white supremacists openly.
Lauren Southern's kind of an idiot. I don't know much about her politically, but everything I've heard about her personal life, I'm just like, this woman's fucking dumb.
They now call themselves white nationalists and racial realists who want an ethno-state. They insist that they don't think white people are superior to other races. They argue that white people are the ones in danger, the disappearing minority that deserves to be preserved. No longer do white supremacists shout with sincerity, "Kill all Jews" in public. Now they couch themselves as the victims as they shout, "Jews will not replace us." But there are other forms of dog whistling and coding that are even more difficult to decipher. Is the OK sign racist? Is Pepe the Frog a Nazi symbol? Is the phrase "subscribe to PewDiePie" a crypto-fascist slogan? The whole point of dog whistles like these is to make discussions about this kind of language and these kinds of symbols seem absurd.
That's the thing, is by making a video like this, where you're like, we have to just destroy all the dog whistles because the dog whistles are so harmful, you're actually just playing into that trap. Like, you don't get it. Like, the joke is on you. You don't get that by being overly uptight and square about it, you are causing your own misery. The dog whistle only works if you're offended by it. If your strategy is to say, no, we need to force these people to go underground with their viewpoints, we need to force them to use dog whistles because this kind of talk is not allowed in polite society, then, this is what you get. You get dog whistles, and then you're mad about the dog whistles. Now we have another thing to be mad about. It's all moral outrage. And the sooner you remove yourself from that, you'll see that, oh, actually, no, we can just deal with this very plainly by being honest and speaking our mind. We don't need to get all vigilant about it. Because vigilance actually really is overrated.
They want to confuse the public enough to stall action. They want to disrupt discourse. By presenting their ideas in absurdist, ironic packaging, they're able to gaslight the public and cast doubt on their more internet-savvy opponents who can see what's real.
The joke is on you when you become absurd enough that the OK sign is now a hate symbol. Like, that's when you know you've lost the plot. Go throw yourself in the fucking river now, because you have abandoned sense and reason, and that's how they win. They win by making you into an ass. They win by convincing you without much effort to make an ass out of yourself by becoming so flagrantly stupid as to say the OK symbol is now a hate symbol. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is your fault. You have brought this about.
Really going on. Step 1. Launch a campaign to make the OK symbol a white supremacist symbol on Chan sites. Step 2. Point out how silly and ridiculous SJWs are for making a big deal.
Yeah, because they realized that, oh, if we do this, they'll believe us, because they're credulous dumbasses. So we can make anything into a hate symbol. We can totally throw a wrench in their whole, Anti-Defamation League or Southern Poverty Law Center list of hate symbols by adding OK to the list. I mean, it was the easiest thing in the world, and they did it. And you don't see the problem with that. You don't see how it might be your fault, partially, that they were able to get away with this because you just lapped it up. You were just like, yep, no, that's a hate symbol, without even, stopping to go, wait a minute. Maybe we're playing a role in this.
Out of nothing in public. Disavow is a common watchword of stochastic terrorists.
Did you see Dr. Duke?
I did. Was he here?
David Duke was
Duke.
The Duke's I
I disavow.
Yeah, of course. Disavowal. Of course.
Disseminate the dog whistle, disavow the dog whistle, then denigrate anti-fascists who try to shed light on what's going on. Hateful internet propaganda is always generated and presented with tongue firmly in cheek. Many of the participants say that they're just in it for the lulz. Many, maybe even most of these people, probably are just doing it for laughs, but there are definitely others who have more sinister intentions. It all makes for a chaotic environment where it's very difficult to know what should be taken seriously and what's just a gag, and that's the whole point.
No, it's not
This
difficult
environment
to know.
allows stochastic terrorists to hide.
It's not actually difficult at all. Here's the secret, okay? Here's how you know what to take seriously. If the person is actually causing harm or saying things that are actually foul and not a joke, then you take it seriously. If they're not, if they're just memeing, you don't have to take it seriously. Wow, what a fucking brilliant observation that was. I solved your problem for you. Now you don't have to be confused. Now you don't have to be going about your life wondering whether to take something seriously or not. Don't remind me of non-compete. Oh, we were reminding you of non-compete. I guess this video is from 6 years ago. So maybe he's changed since then.
In plain sight. When we allow this kind of culture to fester, we make it easy for fascist white nationalists to intentionally precipitate acts of terrorism.
Yeah, exactly. You make it easy. It's not you allowing the culture to fester that has made it easy. It is you being hyper vigilant and trying to shut them down at every turn that inspires them to play around with you and troll you like this. That being said, I actually think that BreadTube and these guys deserve a lot of credit for reversing this trend on YouTube and stuff. Combined with also just YouTube's demonetization rules and stuff. YouTube has actually contributed a lot on their end, on the structural end, to like changing the conversation on the internet, injecting more left-wing opinion, like actually left-wing opinion. So that's good.
Then plausibly deny any knowledge or involvement in the aftermath. I'm not going to share any of the manifesto of the Christchurch shooter in this video because I don't want to platform those vicious ideas in any way, but peppered throughout the 72-page long document are a staggering number of meme references, intentionally misleading statements, and known dog whistles. It's written to deflect, disguise, and disrupt mainstream reaction to the violence while strengthening and emboldening white nationalists who are savvy enough with white nationalist internet culture to read between the lines. You can think of it as a constructed language filled with code words and doublespeak. When a white nationalist sees an obscure meme or a misleading, absurd lie in the shooter's manifesto, they can instantly interpret what's really being meant, what's really being said, and the intent.
Dude, it's the way they treat this stuff like it's really scary. That is so funny to me, and so funny to these people. Because these are memes, these are jokes, and of course in the case of these 4chan people, they do amount to dog whistles, and so I mean, it does make sense to look at these as not, disingenuous. They're genuine opinions that these people are stating, but still. I feel like taking them really seriously is kind of playing into the trap that they're setting with these memes. It's part of the issue. I think one has to learn how to handle memes with proper etiquette if one is going to work in the field of memes. You know what I'm saying?
Intended public reaction. It's just memes until it isn't.
4chan and 8chan got taken offline in the last 6 years, or at least has been heavily targeted and suppressed. People keep pestering companies from hosting the sites. Yeah, well, 8chan got taken down, I think. 4chan is still up. They might have gotten raided at some point. Like Kiwi Farms did when Keffels temporarily got them taken down. But I believe 4chan is still up. But they've gotten rid of a lot of the stuff on 4chan, I think, that ended up migrating to 8chan. The really racist stuff.
So here's how all of this comes together. Individuals who have entered the verbal expression tier of the pyramid of violence have become desensitized to bigotry through edgy comedians. Those same comedians expose them to more hardline bigots. Simultaneously, these individuals become exposed to white nationalist dog whistles and racist.
I remember a while back someone was like, "You made it onto TTTT, you're cooked." And I was like, "What the hell is TTTT?" And they're like, "It's the LGBT board on 4chan." Except people call it TTTT because it's all about trans people. And so I was like, okay, and I went to TTTT to check out what had been said about me. And it was just that guy who commented on my video, who posted me, and then nothing happened. Nobody reacted to it. So he was like, "You're on TTTT, you're cooked." And it's like, what, because you posted me there once and nobody fucking did anything? Great. I'm cooked. That was you? Yeah. But it's like, come on, dude. Give me a break. Like, you got my hopes up. I thought something was happening. I thought people were actually talking about me. Anytime people talk about 4chan, they mostly mean poll. You didn't post me? I could have sworn it was the same person. Maybe not. But now they also mean B. B is the other really famous 4chan board.
Memes on chan sites and other online spaces, and all the while they're pushed along by stochastic terrorists who encourage them to dehumanize marginalized people and expose them to hardline right-wing political ideologies. In the end, it's no surprise at all that unstable individuals can and will get pushed along through the PewDie pipeline until they reach the next tier of the pyramid of violence. Stage 4. Physical violence. Racially motivated acts of physical violence do not just happen randomly. As we've seen in our examination of Stage 3, racist ideation forms gradually over time, and it's facilitated by a wide network of entities working intentionally and unintentionally to further the agenda of stochastic terrorists. By the time someone reaches Stage 4 and carries out an act of physical violence or terrorism, they've been immersed in a racist environment, absorbing and internalizing hateful ideology for a long time.
Yeah, okay.
If the process is interrupted at any stage as an individual passes along from
Physical
Stage 1
violence,
to Stage
I think
3,
we all
then
understand
physical
what that is. So
if you're a
let's get
YouTuber
to
or some other
this
kind of
next
content
section.
creator and you see racist activity in your audience, you have an obligation to take a stand against it. Now, I've searched far and wide, and so far I've only found one mainstream non-political influencer who's
I think
doing
it
a good job.
Depends on what kind of content you're doing. And it depends on what kind of, like how much what you do is affecting the growth of that in your audience, you know? Like, if you're the kind of person who's always doing anti-SJW videos, then I think it is on you to make it very clear where you stand on racist stuff. And to not be ambiguous about that. And to call out people you disagree with on the right as much as you do on the left. Because if you don't do that, then that's grifting. And it's very obvious where your motivations lie. It's in that, you know, oh, I don't want to offend the people who like me. I only want to offend the people who have already invested myself in offending so that I can get these other people to like me. It's all about popularity at that point. You know, it's not about honesty. So that's a case where I would say if a YouTuber is doing that, then yeah, they're unscrupulous and shitty. But it's not always on you, I think, to take a stand, especially in a case like PewDiePie where, like, what are we even talking about? Like, how often is PewDiePie coming across racists in his audience? His audience is enormous. It's like it's exponentially larger than Non-Compete's audience. So Non-Compete, like, how can he even understand what it's like to have an audience that big?
Job of addressing racism in his own audience. Here's a tweet sent out by the YouTuber Tomska. Occasionally I'll catch a glimpse of extreme prejudice within my own audience. Left unchecked, these ideologies can fester and evolve into violent acts. If you find yourself hating a group of people you've never even met, I beg you to reevaluate.
Yeah, so some hackers raided 4chan.
Before it's too late. Now, this statement is simple, but it's bold and powerful. By discouraging prejudice in his own audience, Tomska risks losing subscribers and facing online harassment, but he's also making it clear that he will not be complicit in stochastic terrorism. Imagine how powerful it would be if PewDiePie and other popular YouTubers made statements like these from time to time. Imagine the effect that a tweet like this might have on PewDiePie's 14 million Twitter followers or to his 90 million YouTube subscribers. Now, before I conclude this video, I think it's very important to recognize that PewDiePie as an individual is not what we should really be focusing on.
I mean, PewDiePie has made statements like that. Like, he donated to the Anti-Defamation League because of stuff like this. Or he tried to donate before everyone got on his case for it. And then he also, like, after the Christchurch shooting, he made this video, like, condemning the shooter and saying that he wants nothing to do with that kind of thing. So yeah, PewDiePie has done this. So the fuck are you talking about? Like, he's done what you're telling him to do.
I know I called it the Pewdie pipeline, but honestly, even if PewDiePie never existed, never made a YouTube channel, someone else would be taking this role. And that's the way that this all works. It's not about the individuals, it's about the system, the systematic development of violence within these online spaces. So it might be tempting for us to focus all of our energy on one individual YouTuber And we might want to pat ourselves on the back and call it a victory if we get one of these YouTubers taken down. But I'm telling you, even if PewDiePie and his entire channel disappear tonight, somebody...
The racist troll people are now on X. Yeah, it's pretty interesting the kind of turnaround that X has gone through. Now you can be openly racist on X, which, you know, I kind of wish that there were a place where you could just have regular freedom of speech, you know, that ends at pretty, like, understandable limits, like overt harassment campaigns and calls for illegal activity and stuff like that, doxing. Like, those are limits that everyone can pretty much universally recognize are good limits for free speech. But, like, anything outside of that, I kind of wish that there were a website for that, but instead we just get stuff like X, which is now just, oh, you can, it's a right-wing space. You know, you're not really safe on X if you're a liberal and vocal about your opinions, because someone could see your stuff and shut you down. Like Elon could just on a whim decide to ban you, you know, or not unban you if you were already banned because you're a liberal. You know, there's no actual free speech anywhere on the internet. At least not anywhere that matters.
He knew will spring up and take his place tomorrow as long as this process of stochastic terrorism is permitted to continue. Kellyanne Conway, who is an official counselor to the President of the United States in the Donald Trump administration, has gone on the record and promoted the manifesto of the Christchurch shooter. She's actually encouraged the public at large to read the manifesto. She's actually promoting the manifesto, and not only that, the way that she spoke and the words that she chose, to me they seemed very intentionally chosen, and she introduced some choice bits of misinformation. I'm going to let her speak, and then I'll just kind of give a little analysis afterwards based on everything we've been talking about in this video so far.
Unlike most mass shootings, this man came with pre-receipts, if you will. He put out a 70-page manifesto, and I guess everybody scoured it, searched for Donald Trump's name, and there it is one time. But he also said he aligns closely with the ideology of China. He said he's not a conservative, he's not a Nazi. I think he referred to himself as an eco-naturalist or an eco-fascist. But people should read the in its entirety.
She said that the shooter aligns closely with the ideology of China. And that actually is something that the shooter wrote in the manifesto, that the political regime that he most closely identifies with would be the Chinese government. He also says elsewhere in the manifesto that he's by no means a Marxist, by no means a leftist. He actually invited and incited violence against leftists and Marxists elsewhere in the manifesto. So I believe that the whole idea of saying that he aligns with China, that was misinformation, a dog whistle, a meme, a joke of sorts, intentionally placed into the manifesto to, again, disrupt the discourse, to sow seeds of disorder, to get people confused, to derail the conversation.
That's it, really? That's your brilliant analysis of that? No actual analysis of this guy's real, like, beliefs and why he said that? Did you even read the fucking manifesto? I mean, when to me, like, it's no stretch to imagine why a right-wing person would favor the government of China, because the government of China is a nationalist dictatorship. But of course, the problem with people like Non-Compete is that they're like morons who choose to put their head in the sand and not recognize the very right-wing nature of a lot of communist regimes. There was another guy, Ben something, who did work for the Young Turks at some point, who was also doing this, like making videos about, oh, did you know that China is like more democratic than the United States? No, it's not. Shut the fuck up. Like, seriously. give me a fucking break. This just strikes me as such lazy analysis that, like, he's really just gonna go, yeah, the guy didn't mean it. It was just a lie, you know? Not even attempting to come up with an explanation for how to reconcile these ideas. Like, okay, eco-fascism, China, how do we tie this all together? Just being like, nah, he was lying. It was just there for a gag, just to confuse us. I guess reality can be whatever we want, you know? If it's inconvenient for him to acknowledge this guy's political views, then he can just say, no, it's wrong. Nah, he lied. He doesn't actually believe that. Wow.
And to embolden white nationalists who will see something like this for exactly the kind of dog whistle that it is and know exactly what's being meant and what's being intended. And Kellyanne Conway has taken that, and, you know, whether knowingly or unknowingly, who can be sure, but Kellyanne Conway has taken that and fed right into the hands of this stochastic terrorist, you know, because the manifesto of the shooter is itself a piece of stochastic terrorism. Not only did he go out and do this horrible, horrible act of physical violence, but he also left this document, which is a mechanism of stochastic terrorism. The manifesto itself is intended to inspire and provoke even more acts of stochastic terrorism down the pipeline. So Kellyanne Conway, in promoting this manifesto, is promoting stochastic terrorist activation material. Not only that, there are other pieces of misinformation that Kellyanne Conway introduced.
Did he just forget to put the visual aids in this last section? It's just black. It's a black screen. Wow, okay.
In this interview, she said that the terrorist is not a conservative, not a Nazi, which to me seems like a subtle defense of Nazis. She said that he's an eco-naturalist or an eco-fascist. Now, most of the people who are going to be watching this televised news, you know, they're going to be baby boomers, the kind of people who are not going to go out and seek out the manifesto. So, and if they're already receptive to these right-wing Trump administration messages, they're just going to take whatever she said and run with it. So they're going to believe that this is a eco-naturalist who follows the Chinese government, and they're going to assume that it's, you know, it's a leftist who committed these acts, and that lie is going to get established and disseminated far and wide on the right, and it risks bleeding into the center as well. And it reminds me a lot of a piece from Sean's video on Charlottesville, which I'll play now, which talks about how these right-wing lies can spread like wildfire if we're not careful and if we don't stamp them out immediately.
And there was, of course, also a conspiracy theory that Heather Heyer was not hit by the car at all, and instead coincidentally died of a heart attack nearby at around the same time.
Just to jump in on the car thing, as I understand it, I thought Heather Hayes or Heyer or whatever her name was, I thought she died of a heart attack.
Yes, it looks like what happened is that he was shocked by seeing the car crash happening. Yeah. And had a heart attack. It's really sort of. I know. It's horrible, but it does seem a very dramatic reaction to a car crash.
It's more that the alt-right are being blamed for someone having a heart attack. Someone in tremendously bad physical condition has heart attack, and suddenly the alt-right has murdered someone. This is something I'm surprised the alt-right doesn't make a big deal out of, to be honest. You know, I would have thought that.
We try to.
That's white supremacist millennial woes there, talking to YouTube personality Sargon of Akkad, who is, as usual, mindlessly repeating whatever rubbish he's overheard Nazis say. But I do think there's an important point to be made here about how easily white nationalist lies can spread among the lazy and uneducated, and we need to be vigilant in checking and correcting those lies, lest we end up as witless Nazi stooges.
He implies that Sargon is part of the lazy and uneducated. I would certainly agree with the lazy part.
Just like Sargon.
No matter who you are, you can help fight stochastic terrorism. If you know someone who seems to be moving up through the pyramid of violence, try to stop them before it becomes too late. Help spread the word about the very real and violent consequences of edgelord humor and the role that these jokes play in stochastic terrorism. We must stand together and fight fascism in all forms. I'm American Johnson. This is
So, I mean, this video is called How Racist Humor Leads to Violence, but he never, if I'm going to criticize this video, which I have been, but, if I'm going to criticize this video on a holistic level, he never really linked racist humor to violence very well. He never established a correlation or a causation. The building blocks were there. He put some stuff together. I think, actually, there was stuff that he didn't include from that manifesto. Like, when the Christchurch shooter talked about, like, Muslims, he referenced the movie Team America World Police with the Durka Durka Jihad. That's an example of, like, I guess racist humor, But again, in that movie, they're making fun of racism. But according to Non-Compete, there's no difference between making fun of racism and being racist. So he could have used that as an example. Like, there are things that he could have done to actually strengthen this argument that he didn't do. And on the whole, it's a very weak thesis. Yeah, a lot of these breadtubers I just don't think are very good writers. They have weak theses, and they just don't do much to compensate for those weak theses, and then people just kind of eat it up. But at the end, you're not really left with a great, compelling video. It's just kind of watery. But there we go. I'll see, what do I want to watch next? Let me see. We could watch some Sargon. I have one Sargon video here. We have a lot of tick history we could watch. Ugh, we have this video, which is really long. Don't know about that. I'll try this one from Morbid Zoo. We already watched her first one a while back, called Donald Trump is Not a Fascist, a Leftist Perspective. And now this is a part 2 that she did. And I'm curious what more she has to add.
Everyone, it's almost that time again. After a brief respite at Grandpa's house, another presidential election is just around the corner, which means once again we all have to perform the ritual of pretending this New York billionaire and establishment figure of American celebrity culture is either a super normal man of the people or a shocking invasion and grotesque corruption of American values. During our last go-around, I made a video called Donald Trump is Not a Fascist, which to this day is probably my least understood video. I don't think my argument could be much clearer, to be quite honest, but I thought it might be useful to respond to some of the criticisms it's gotten so we can more usefully think about what's actually at stake in this election. Some are more fair than others in that they at least invite some degree of thought and conversation instead of just aping the latest Twitter dunk and acting like they came up with it themselves. I can already tell this aged like milk. This aged like milk. This aged poorly. This video aged like milk. This aged like fucking milk in the sun. This aged poorly. poorly. This video sure aged like milk. This aged like milk. This aged like milk. You know when a 5-year-old expects the adults in every room to think a bit they've lifted from Paw Patrol is as cute the 200th time as it is the first? But if we add some sort of adult vocabulary to this comment, the substance of it goes something like this. 4 years ago, when you made this video, I can understand why you would have had this opinion, but now Trump's fascism is so obvious as to render this position hopelessly dated. I don't even know where to start with this. We are talking about the same guy, right? Donald John Trump, 45th president of the United States. The same guy who said immigrants are criminals and rapists and installed a Muslim travel ban and both sides did a white supremacist demonstration that killed someone and downplayed COVID to make himself look better and canceled a diplomatic trip to Denmark because they rejected the suggestion of him buying Greenland and used the National Guard to disperse protesters so he could do a photo op holding a Bible like a kid who got socks for Christmas and incited a riot that he did nothing about for hours even after people were injured and killed and tried to get his vice president to illegally reinstate him as president. That Donald Trump, right? I cannot figure out where this is coming from, this suggestion that there's ever been a time we can point to in Donald Trump's political life where he was somehow like more tolerable compared to now.
I can understand how now, after he's already been president again, people saying it aged like milk. But 6 months ago, before the election, this is made on November 4th. Before the election, people saying this? Yeah, no. Nothing had really changed much.
Donald Trump has sustained every bit of his racism, sexism, and regard for ostensive American laws and values for the past 4 years. 8 years, honestly. 10 years. As long as he's been in his political life. Nothing at all has changed about how Trump speaks or appears to think about any issue, except that he's just gotten more incoherent because he's a gross old fuck who doesn't take care of himself either physically or mentally. If he is fascist today, then he was fascist 4 years ago. Also, when people say this is an argument that aged poorly, what they seem to be pointing toward, if I can interpret this in a way that makes sense, is the amount of circumstantial support Trump has gained in the past few years, right? The fact that people like Stephen Miller apparently just feel a lot more comfortable being totally evil on camera than they used to. And that's the point of...
Does she look
calling
kind of like Keffels to any of you? She looks a little bit like Keffels in the eyes to me.
People fascist, right? It's an attempt to startle people into recognizing that someone is an evil authoritarian. Trump is an evil authoritarian, so what's the problem? How does it make anything different? If Trump's administration and his supporter base is fascist, then that makes him fascist by extension, regardless of what he personally believes. Trump not being fascist doesn't make the situation any better. This really seems like a semantic argument. God, this comment drives me insane. It makes me want to walk into the sea. When I go to hell, Satan himself is going to wake me up every single morning by saying, that seems like mostly a semantic argument. I don't believe.
Yeah, it is a semantic argument because the whole fucking video is about semantics. The whole video is about whether or not this one word, this one semantical article applies to Donald Trump. So no shit, it's a semantic argument. What a dumb criticism. Like, it's not a criticism to say it's a semantic argument when you clicked on a video that is nakedly about semantics.
In semantic arguments. Or pedantic arguments, if you like, because that's really what's meant by this. Either the meaning of words and why we use them matters, or it doesn't. I will never be compelled by the suggestion that we just shouldn't think about the words we use or why we use them. The problem is that I don't think we are interrogating why the word fascist carries such emotional emphasis to begin with. I will tell you why it holds such emphasis now. Fascist, in its current use, is a word that was very much defined during the post-war era, first and foremost, in derogatory opposition to the emerging free market democracy ideal to which every other country should aspire, or whatever. So the word isn't describing any kind of actual codified political ideology unless you are referring specifically to Mussolini's version. Even the Nazis didn't claim the term fascist. That's not an excuse for the Nazis. It's an interrogation of this weird thing we've decided to call fascism, whose definition appears to just magically shift its borders to incorporate whatever we decide we don't want to be known for in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I would say broader than Mussolini. There was a broader movement of fascism outside of Italy. But I think it just gets tricky because of how the movement just kind of died after World War II. It wasn't really allowed to continue under that guise. So, because of that, it wasn't really given enough time to define itself in the intellectual space. And so it became more of a pejorative.
The word fascist is implicitly always positioned as oppositional to American values and behavior. And because of that, all sorts of shitty American customs, the entire culture we've built over the past 100 years that produced Donald Trump, basically gets a complete pass. That's my problem with the word fascist. To be a fascist, colloquially, is to be whatever American identity isn't. The social function the word fascist exists to serve is to label somebody as not...
I do kind of like that point. That point feels very kind of like critical theory. Like, you know, it's the whole system that's corrupt. Or like George Carlin. You know, it's the public who suck. The public sucks. How about that for a slogan? You know, all of these things that are believed to be A-okay until they produce someone like Trump, who's really just, you know, the natural consequence of the way American values are and the way American society is set up. You know, then we can scapegoat Donald Trump as the problem. But he's not the problem. It's everything that created him.
Not like us. It's the word that takes you as far as you can get with political analysis without resorting to insult, even though an insult is functionally what it is. It's almost exactly the same function the word communist had during the Cold War. And we can see this real time in how Trump has been described as a fascist by Kamala Harris or John Kelly and Mark Milley, government officials whose opinion about this carries a lot of weight, despite the fact that if we're thinking about how to define fascism, I literally cannot think of a less reliable source than officials of the US government. Why? Because the US government has an extremely good incentive to define fascism as fundamentally oppositional to American business as usual, even when that definition describes American policy. So, like, let's take General Kelly's definition.
It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultra-nationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictator.
Dude, I always cringe when people use the word ultra-nationalist to define fascism. Even Oswald Mosley did that back in the 70s when he was on The Late Late Show. Or, no, it was when he was on The Buckley Show, Firing Line. Which, yeah, that was 72. Even he used it to define fascism. But I always kind of cringe at that because it's like, you guys do realize that the word ultranationalist was coined specifically to figure out how to define fascism, so you're not really saying anything. You're like, you might as well be saying, yeah, fascism, it's when things are, like, kind of fascist, you know? Like, what does ultranationalism even mean outside of fascism? It's never used outside of discussions of fascism. What does it just mean? Nationalism, but like really nationalist? Wow. What a great description. No, it's nationalist and collectivist. It's national collectivism, you know. If you want to say anything, like that's a little bit more useful.
Leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy.
I'm sorry, is the United States not militaristic? Has the United States never been ultranationalist? Has the leadership of the United States never believed in a natural hierarchy, forcibly suppressed opposition, or established dictatorial leaders and centralized autocracies across the world, even as we've declared ourselves the global model of democracy? John Kelly's description of fascism is almost to the letter exactly how the United States has conducted itself as a global presence for nearly 100 years. Okay? Our standard of behavior abroad since World War II has been to systematically overthrow democratically elected leaders of countries that might pose an ideological threat to American capitalist interests, install right-wing dictators, and then say we're making the world safe for democracy. Over the past century, the United States has murdered millions of people doing this. So, you know, I just think that at a certain point we have to acknowledge that fascism as a concept is so broad that the lines we use to denote it take their shape based on whatever the political establishment needs it to be. Honestly, as far as I can tell, fascist is basically a word that was built to provide plausible deniability to post-war imperialism. The word fascist is like a fetish we use to curse people with ostracization when they get a little too mask off. The modern American standard of behavior is basically that as long as somebody important isn't calling you fascist, then you can have a little bit of murder and authoritarianism as a treat. It's interesting that this annoys me so much. I think it's because people on the left and the center, everybody who's center and left of, are supposed to be the educated ones, right? People on that side of the political spectrum are such snobs about their measured and reasonable assessments of society. We're supposed to be like the forward-thinking ones, right? Like the ones who make an effort to be skeptical and informed. But like this fascism thing as it relates to Trump couldn't be more thoughtless or reactionary. It couldn't be less critical. And I think this is pretty well reflected in this actual scholarly opinion, which is usually actually a lot more ambivalent than the journalistic headlines about this issue would lead you to believe. It's so typical. Somebody will like ask a professor whether vaccines work, and the professor will say something like, well, it's not a, it's not a magic bullet. It's not a 100% type thing, but it's good that we have vaccines and they provide a lot of value. We'd be a lot worse off without them, and they'll definitely be better in the future. And every headline will be like, science confirms vaccines are trash. But I'm increasingly kind of annoyed at how scholars...
Forced nationalism, obsessive nationalism, cult-like nationalism. I mean, all of that describes regular nationalism already. Like, I feel like nationalism has always been ultra-nationalist. There's no nationalism that isn't ultra-nationalist. Kind of like, yeah, if you swing in that direction, you swing hard. I don't know. This word ultranationalist I've never liked. It always seemed like such a cop-out. And this person, the one thing I did not like about her first video is that she, again, did not define fascism properly. Because she did not say anything about the centrality of the state to fascist thought, which I think is the most central aspect of fascist thought. You cannot have fascism without a state. If it's stateless, or if it's ambivalent to the state, if the state is a mere machine in fascism, then it's not fascism. Then I'm willing to be essentialist on that level, that like, this is the criteria. And if you don't follow this one piece of criteria, you can't call it fascism. So it's frustrating to me that so many people fail to get that criteria or bring it up.
Are also sort of appropriating this journalistic trend. Like, so here's UNC Chapel Hill professor Christopher Browning writing about a new kind of fascism. I've resisted using the word until now, but something menacing and novel is taking shape with the possibility of a second Trump term. So this looks like a pretty straightforward assessment of Trump being fascist, but what he actually says is...
I don't know how all these lefty YouTubers talk so much about fascism, but won't even do the bare minimum of reading the doctrine of fascism in order to understand it on a basic level. Well, they do read other people. They read people who have read the doctrine of fascism. You know? They read a lot of secondary sources. But, I don't know. The act of reading the primary source on fascism seems to not be... It seems to be like a thing that people don't think to do. But it's very helpful. Clears up a lot of misunderstandings.
Not exactly what the headline implies. For me, what Trump is offering for his second presidency will meet the threshold, and the label I'd choose to describe it would be isolationist fascism. Until now, such a concept would have been an oxymoron, a historical phenomenon without precedent. Trump continues to break every mold. And that's the end of the article.
How is Trump an isolationist? In no fucking universe is Trump an isolationist. What?
This failure to actually think farther than this that annoys me. The reason Trump continues to break every mold is not because he's some magical supernatural force that just instantly undoes rules as soon as they're established. Trump is not a mastermind. He's a fundamentally stupid person who relies on the gravitational pull of bribery and celebrity.
By the way, Shahid, like, I know based on some of your comments that, like, you're not great at English, but I'm curious, like, how good at English are you? Like, could you have a conversation in English? Just curious, because, like, I have thought that you'd be an interesting person to talk to. Trump literally wants to colonize Gaza. Yeah, in no universe is Trump an isolationist. That's such a stupid conclusion to come to.
To keep things running smoothly for him and him alone.
I think that... like, it makes way more sense to call Trump a fascist than to call him an isolationist.
And even if he were a mastermind, it would still be the case that if you set a categorical standard and the thing you're studying continues to break that standard, then it's not the thing you're studying that's the problem, it is your model. We should not just throw up our hands and act like the thing we're studying is some magical, unnameable impossibility just because it doesn't behave in whatever way we wish.
Oh, you have a BA on translation in English? That's pretty good.
It would, so we can sustain the structural integrity of our categories. So what's the point of having this conversation?
Good to know.
How does saying Trump isn't fascist change anything about what we should do? I think this is a fair question. Okay, as much as this annoys me, I think this is a totally fair question to ask. I used a taxonomy analogy last time, so let's use another one. This is an eastern brown snake. This is a king brown snake. Both of these snakes are native to Australia and look basically identical, but if you get bitten by an eastern brown snake and get king brown snake anti-venom, you're gonna die. And if that happens, you probably won't be comforted on your deathbed by your doctor telling you, well, at least we can congratulate ourselves for recognizing that both these snakes are brown. I do think it's worth pursuing a definition of fascism if we can get away from fascism basically being code for anything America isn't willing to admit they do. To the extent that our current definition is workable at all, I will tell you that the main difference I see between Donald Trump and the behavior we keep calling fascist is Trump's complete lack of any collectivist principle. If there's any consistency to fascism as a thought structure, it is certainly a sort of sincere collectivist glory tied to an imagined idealized past, right? And that's just not what I see in Trump. He is very open about how little he cares about any kind of moral standard, good or bad, that doesn't benefit him personally. And that's not to say that this collectivist attitude isn't present in certain sectors of MAGA as a movement. It's the case for a lot of the people Trump surrounds himself with. many, if not most of whom I would say, gun to my head, absolutely qualify as fascist, specifically because of this imagined past they're trying to materialize from scratch, right? But Trump himself, no. Absolutely not. Trump is not trying to regain a glorious past. He's trying to sustain whatever glorious present it is that has allowed him to lie and cheat and steal his way into power, fame, and wealth. He does not want to be a leader. He wants to appoint himself child king, which is honestly just a small-scale version of the position the United States has had globally for the better part of the last century. For Donald Trump and most of his followers, the freedom offered by America as a social project is specifically freedom from responsibility. They think freedom means the ability to act like a complete shithead anytime, anywhere, and avoid the consequences.
Yeah.
He has no...
I mean, you see that in the movie The Apprentice. I thought that movie did a great job at showcasing that. How Roy Cohn was talking to him about his dad's legal trouble, and he was like, "That's bullshit. It's your place. You should be able to rent to whoever the fuck you want. It's a free country," you know. Like that was Roy Cohn's idea of what freedom meant. Like, yeah, if it's your property, you can do whatever you want with it. You know, nobody should be able to tell you that you're discriminating against people on racial grounds and that that's not okay. It's a free country.
Principles, collective or
no responsibility
otherwise. He is a liar and a cheater, and that's quite literally the reason people like him. The reason he's a populist icon is because he's been living in elite society for the past 60 years
it was a much better movie at doing that kind of thing than the Oliver Stone movie W. Because W was okay. I mean, I watched it and, you know, it kept my interest the whole way through, but it left me with nothing. Like, I got no takeaway from it. And it was just kind of a lazy piece because it didn't have any interesting structure or storytelling. It was just kind of like, yeah, we're sort of showing Bush in a sympathetic light, but also sort of making fun of him, but not really saying anything. The Apprentice was a great movie because it did show him sympathetically. It did show the real roots of his corruption and just how corrupt he is. And it just gave a good portrait of him that didn't shy away from the negative side of things, but also made him a real character, you know?
Admitting that the lack of any kind of moral or ethical standard that drives the seats of social and economic power in this country is the real American way. The American way is to put up a principled front and then lie and steal and cheat behind closed doors. Trump followers think that him admitting that is what makes him honest. They think he's saying freedom means we should all be able to lie and cheat and steal, that every human interaction is a zero-sum game, and the greatness of America is that we got the drop on everyone when we were pretending to be friendly emissaries of democracy. If you confront a Trump supporter with January 6th these days and ask what they have to say about Trump refusing to peacefully leave office, 10 times out of 10, that supporter will say that Trump did peacefully leave office. And their evidence is that, well, Biden is president right now, not Trump.
And I understand he denied the last election results, but he also left the White House the day he was supposed to leave the White House.
Is this stupid? Yeah, it's stupid. They've just decided it doesn't matter as long as they get their way, because that's the model of behavior Trump represents. That specifically, that freedom from responsibility, is a moral badness that simply isn't described by fascism. I have to date encountered...
I think it's more of a case of, like, I agree with this person that the guy was wrong to say that it doesn't matter so much that he denied the election results. But I think at the time in his first term, he wasn't as dangerous as he is now. And so I think that it was very easy for people to say, well, you know, look at this guy. I mean, he talked a big talk, but then at the end, you know, he bowed his head and, you know, went home peaceably. So, like, how much should we really be taking seriously this idea of Trump as a threat? And I think that's a fair enough point. I think things are different now that he's been shot and he's survived his, you know, 90 however many felony convictions. You know, I think he has a different mindset now.
No definition of fascism that frames it as an ideology that promotes disengagement from the community. Quite the fucking opposite. Fascism is pathologically engaged with the community. The entire practical function of fascism as we know it right now is to micromanage how people live, make them responsible for upholding a strict set of social laws until every individual is a perfect copy of the national ideal. And that's not what Trump is trying to do. Trump is not
necessarily. I get that that's kind of the impression that you can get from fascism, but I think there's a little bit. It's not as rigid as that, and I do think that, you know, depending on which fascist you're talking to, there was at least some respect for the individual as an individual. It wasn't an entirely. I would say it was supremely collectivist, but it wasn't. It wasn't pathologically collectivist, I guess. The way she said it, I did kind of like that phrasing, though, pathologically collectivist.
Thinking about that. He doesn't care, because he doesn't care about anything. If we abandon the term fascism to describe the danger that Trump represents, as I believe we should, then I think the term that should replace it has so far best been described in Professor of Philosophy Aaron James' book, Assholes, a Theory. An asshole, according to James, is a person who systematically allows himself to enjoy special advantages in interpersonal relations out of an entrenched sense of entitlement that immunizes
lots of moral policing. There certainly is moral policing in fascism, but I don't know if it's as, like, dystopian as a lot of people make it out to be. All the time, anyway.
Him against the complaints of other people. Basically, an asshole is someone who completely acknowledges that a functional society requires people to follow a certain set of rules, but believes that he should only have to follow those rules when he feels like it. This is basically the structure of the American economy, culture, and government. We're all subject to certain rules, but only losers and idiots take that seriously. The real winners of society are the ones who take what they want and challenge you to tell them no. Trumpism is philosophical.
Yeah, pretty much. And that's part of why when people say free Luigi, I'm like, yeah, but fuck Luigi. Because, like, I get it. I'm not even saying that, like, he shouldn't have done what he did. But we got laws. So, you know, throw him in jail. Fuck him. That's the fucking law. Shut up. You know, if you want the laws to apply to the rich and powerful, then they also have to apply to us. You know? You don't get to always win.
Philosophical assholery transformed into a public virtue. It is not restore the glory of the Volk, it's fuck you got mine.
What we have is not a democratic system, it's a system of
David Graeber.
Legalized bribery.
I kind of like David Graeber. Everything I've seen from him pretty much I've liked, except for I think he totally shit the bed when talking about corporatism one time. Like, he totally did not understand what corporatism was. And that was very strange. So that was one area where I thought he was a total idiot. But everything else I've seen from David Graeber I've enjoyed. He has a good way of talking. I was going to say something before I saw David Graeber on screen, but I can't remember what it was.
In most countries, if you give politicians money to influence their vote, that's called bribery. It's corruption. It's illegal. We've managed to eliminate the corruption problem largely by legalizing it.
If you watched the first video and concluded that what I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't worry about Trump because he's not a fascist, then you either, I'm sorry, have piss poor media literacy skills, or you didn't watch the video. The result is the same. I agree. Trump not being fascist doesn't make things better.
Well,
it makes things...
I think people who don't watch a video and then criticize it, even though they haven't watched it, they automatically have poor media literacy skills, you know? I think that means you have bad media literacy. If you think that's appropriate, then yeah.
Worse. It's evidence that there are forms of authoritarianism that exist outside our primitive understanding of a flat spectrum between different kinds of 20th century collectivisms. If we refuse to acknowledge that freedom from responsibility is what Trumpism represents, then we're disregarding the rot in our culture that allows American standards of behavior to dovetail so easily into the violent authoritarianism we keep calling fascism. The fact is that if you construct a country based on the idea that power is achieved through bullying, bribery, cultural attention, gross displays of wealth, and constantly and very publicly redefining moral standards based on what benefits you personally, the natural result is Donald Trump. Trumpism is not foreign to American values. It is the logical endpoint of American values. When Donald Trump is dead and gone, his ghost will still haunt
It's the logical endpoint of Reaganism.
Everything we do. It'll be in the way we extract and coerce and manipulate, both at home and abroad, and in the way we arrive in places, again, both domestic and abroad, with big promises about greatness and utopian prosperity, and then only leave once we've ruined them. This is the thing we need to address if we want to avoid another Trump in the future, that I don't think is served by calling him fascist. What we need is not rejection, but acceptance of the fact that Trump is something we actively created as a country. The United States and the people at the top of its hierarchy has maintained its powers specifically by deploying accusations like fascism, by pointing at everything and everybody except at itself. That's basically the entire Trump playbook. Deflect, attack, never allow yourself to be subject to something as pedestrian as accountability, because that's for losers.
Attack, attack, attack. If somebody comes after you with a knife, you shoot him back with a bazooka, okay? Rule 2, what is truth, Tony? What is truth? What is the truth in life? Deny everything, admit nothing. You know what's true? What I say is true. And third of all, and most important, no matter how fucked you are.
And this is the last scene in the movie, too. This is the scene that it leaves us off on. This movie was so good because it understood the Trump mentality and philosophy. It's like, this is the root of the problem with Donald Trump. And it showed it for what it was, and it showed how rooted it was in Americanism, and how America was so important to Roy Cohn and his beliefs, and to Ronald Reagan. And like, it just painted this picture in such a perfect and elegant way. I really think that this is an important movie for anyone to watch if they are interested in, you know, why things are the way they are these days.
You never, ever, ever admit defeat. You always claim victory. Always.
You know, that sounds like the U.S. foreign policy the past quarter century.
See, he even says it right there.
Being an asshole. Being a person devoid of honor or integrity who's...
Yeah, it's a great movie for showing how all the things that people complain about Donald Trump are integral to America in our national mentality, you know? Like, this is what Americanism is.
His only true, heartfelt belief is that honor and integrity are for the weak and stupid must be enough of a reason to not elect somebody president. And if it's not, if we have to resort to pretending American culture and Donald Trump don't obviously share a genealogy in order to get rid of him, then this country is way more cooked than we're willing to admit. So yeah, vote against Donald Trump. Absolutely. Please do. Oh my God. But
I think the closest philosophical text that can be compared to Trump's approach to politics is Might is Right by Ragnar Redbeard. Huh. I can see that. I haven't actually read it, but... yeah, so this is a pretty good video, I think. I think this video is better than the previous video she did on this subject. It's not bad. Pretty good. Oh, here's another video by Harlan Spinks. I put it on the playlist.
I got a new light, so if I squint, that's why. It's a lot brighter.
I'm guessing he's a Tarantino fan.
Does life feel more oppressive lately, aside from living in a failed state that is actively collapsing around us? I mean, physically and aesthetically oppressive, gray and lifeless. Like, does just walking around outside feel different than it did when you were a kid? Well, a kid who was born before the year 2000.
I was born before the year 2000, but right before. Yeah, this guy again. I haven't noticed much of a difference myself.
Everything from new buildings, industrial design, cars, guardrails, and the branding of consumer packaged goods is uglier now. Things like park benches went from being ornate, wrought iron resting places to torture devices for the unhoused that are so unwelcoming, not even people with houses want to sit on them. And sometimes they're not just ugly, they're non-existent and removed altogether. Sorry, pregnant people and basically anyone with a disability.
Life has always felt gray and lifeless for me. Aw.
Pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. What do you mean you don't have legs? Railings had a similar design to wrought iron benches and are now something straight out of an episode of Andor's dystopian cyber hell. Company rebrands are sleek and forgettable, footwear brands make nondescript facsimiles of what only resembles a shoe, and architecture used to be an awe-inspiring thing to behold. Now everything is a 5/1 housing complex that drives anyone with even the slightest OCD insane. What the hell is this? Artistry and character have slowly been supplanted by efficiency and function over the last, I don't know, decade or so, when minimalism...
Why is everything ugly? He's gonna say capitalism. There, I just saved you 20 minutes. Probably.
had a renaissance thanks in no small part to the hegemony of Steve Jobs' Apple and people like Joshua Fields Milburn and Ryan Nicodemus proselytizing the wondrous...
See, I don't know how influential these guys were, even though I have heard of them, and I've seen their TED Talk.
Benefits of living a minimalist lifestyle. You may recognize them as the minimalist guys who wrote their first of 4 books in 2011, and then made a documentary for Netflix in 2016 that was the most pretentious, idiotic shit on the planet. And that was the year Trump first got elected.
I think a lot of people who are against minimalist design these days are... like, they're very kind of narrow-minded, and they forget how refreshing minimalist design was when it first rolled out. Because it was kind of nice to wipe the slate clean a bit. And, because in the 2000s, I remember everything was very detailed in its rendering, because, people realized, oh, look at all the great rendering we can do with computers now. And you got like the Frutiger Aerowave and other stuff like that really emphasize detail and lots of lighting and texture and depth. But it was kind of cool when some people came along and were like, hey, let's strip it all down. We don't need all that. Let's make it very plain. It kind of felt hip in a way, futuristic. And so I really appreciate minimalist design. I think it has a place. It's very aesthetically pleasing, but it's all contextual. Yeah, now that we're surrounded by it everywhere, it does start to get old. But yeah, that's just a matter of, when you have a density of a certain style, a new style is craved, something new is craved, and people will go for it eventually.
I'm not saying they or Jobs single-handedly influenced the cold, sterile design of everyday objects we see today, but they certainly popularized it as a movement and brought it into people's homes. And then there are people like James Altucher, a wealthy serial entrepreneur who said he gave up his permanent home, life goals, and negative emotions, threw away his college diploma, and said, I don't hold on to all the things society tells me to hold on to. Now he carries nothing but a bag of clothes and a backpack containing a computer, an iPad, and a smartphone. Quote, I have 0 other possessions. How obnoxiously pretentious. A decade later, and we're stuck with this bastardized version of minimalism being applied to everything. Somewhere along the line, someone misinterpreted minimalism as mid-century modern, but get rid of any color and make everything out of aluminum and concrete. Minimalism has been a design philosophy since the mid-20th century, so
I don't know, I still see a lot of color in minimalist design.
It's not new, and as far as I understand it, was about reducing a subject down to only the most basic elements out of necessity or artistic intent. In the context of
it really is just a revival of mid-century modern,
post-war era industrial design, it's a good philosophy to live by because materials are scarce and minimalism functions best when working within constraints. It forces you to think outside the box sometimes and apply more creative problem-solving techniques that you normally wouldn't have to worry about with abundance. Applying the philosophy more broadly today also makes sense to a degree due to the cost of materials.
Sure is crazy how aesthetic taste among the general public changes over time. Does Harland have a less cluttered room in his house? Here he could film where he could film this? Why is there so much shit piled behind? Yeah, that is a good question. What is going on behind him? He's got like a door, just a random door, not even attached to a doorway, just leaning against there. He's got like garden tools here. He's got a pile of something in the corner. Like, what is going on with this room? He has a vacuum cleaner hose. It looks like it's under construction or something, under renovation.
Materials and labor to actually make something more intricate and detailed. But in exchange, we've gotten soulless IKEA furniture masquerading as minimalism using cheap materials in order to increase profit.
Hold on. This one on the right looks better than the one on the left. Like, if you put this thing on the left into this room on the right, it would stick out like a sore thumb and look really weird. And it takes up way too much space. You don't need this much space for a bookshelf. Like, this bottom half, what is this, a cabinet? Like, why do you need that? Get rid of that. This thing is heavy and cumbersome. Like, try moving this thing around. You need a room that aesthetically, like, aids this piece of furniture. You need a room with some atmosphere and some, like tobacco smoke in the air. And God, shut up. My phone keeps chiming at me. I don't know why they have to say that in the group chat. Anyway, like this bookshelf on the right actually works with the environment that it's in. It looks nice, it looks clean, it looks sleek, it's functional. Yeah, this one on the left just looks really cumbersome and bulky. So yeah, I disagree. Disagree with this guy's take. I mean, the one on the right's cheaper, sure, but that doesn't mean it's worse. Sometimes cheaper is better.
Profit margins and the dreaded millennial gray void interior design trend that every house flipper applies because they only needed to buy one color of paint. For many living a minimalist lifestyle, it's not really a choice because 66% of the US population is living paycheck to paycheck, and they're not intentionally living in a studio apartment furnished with nothing but a bed and a TV, but because they're broke. On the flip side, when it is a choice, it comes across as elitist and unattainable. Minimalism became a populist movement by the wealthy as a way to reject past norms of rich folks flaunting a garish lifestyle on MTV Cribs, so the pendulum swung the other way, where people like Kim Kardashian now live in monochromatic temples of nothing.
Kim Kardashian's house is just horrifically bad. It is a really bad house. In the same way that high fashion is bad fashion. It seems more designed to be ostentatiously minimalist rather than actually being aesthetically pleasing and comfortable to live in. That being said, like, I totally understand why rich people wouldn't want to live in something like this. Or something like what Donald Trump lives in, you know? Like, I think it's totally okay to be a rich person and just want a nicer, cleaner house with less clutter.
Else as uncivilized, where ornamentation was a kind of savagery, posing the reductive modernism of white Europeans as the ultimate answer to all aesthetic problems. Yeeg. During its resurgence in the 2010s, every design racist too. Logically soothing about them, there's levels of nothingness. Curbed senior story producer Diana Budd says these homes are impossible. They have no signs of life. There is something psychologically soothing about them. There's a lot of order and calming colors. I just don't think that most people can live like that. Minimalism might also be a bit racist too. Modernist architects like Adolf Loos often defined everything else as uncivilized, where ornamentation was a kind of savagery, posing the reductive modernism of white Europeans as the ultimate answer to all aesthetic problems. Yeeg. During its resurgence in the 2010s, every design major and tech bro creamed their jeans over
I feel like anything could be racist if you want it to be.
For a minimalist lifestyle, who were suspiciously also the same people you'd hear complain about having to see unhoused people during their commute and use racist dog whistles when talking about local crime rates. They had the means to decorate their homes like the interior of an Apple store, with expensive furniture made out of aluminum and rare wood that was probably sourced from an illegal lumber operation in the Amazonian rainforest. And now you can't walk down the street without being confronted with hostile minimalist architecture and design. This is ultra minimalism that isn't just an aesthetic preference, but a larger societal issue with real consequences for culture, community, and our mental health. It's the small m minimal.
Bro had to throw in the shirt pull to make sure everyone knew he didn't approve of racism. Yeah, he knew what he was doing putting that in there. He's such a shithead.
That's infiltrating everything and stripping public spaces and everyday objects.
Such a shit stirrer. I know a way to turn people against minimalism. Accuse it of being racist.
Objects of detail and character. Phone booths, public benches, doorbells, logos, everything is reduced to its most basic form regardless if the reduction makes the thing better, leaving it devoid of cultural significance or unique identity. Design, even when talking about something like a bollard, isn't just about function. It can represent the identity and culture of the place in which it exists. Take the iconic red English phone booth. Its design made it an iconic cultural artifact that people associate with British identity. Painting it red wasn't exactly just an aesthetic choice, but a functional and creative way to make the public service stand out in a busy city. Payphones are basically obsolete now, but when they did still exist in the US, instead of blending function and creativity to create something significant, they were made in a way that favored efficiency over adding anything of value beyond simple functionality. Opportunities to enrich culture don't come in big displays alone, like a skyscraper or a sculpture in a park. They can be as small as something like a payphone. The US didn't have awesome TARDIS phone booths. I know the TARDIS was blue, get out of the comments, but we did have our...
The TARDIS was specifically a police box, and I don't know what the purpose of a police box is. Is it like a phone booth for calling the police? I don't really get it. Why can't you just use a regular phone booth for that? So there must have been some purpose for a police box. I don't know what they're for.
Our own version that became synonymous with Bill and Ted's Time Machine that added to the culture of the 80s. By the end of the 2000s, they were bland, forgettable, and culturally meaningless, and something you actively avoided because they were always sticky for some reason. I guess in that way, their cultural significance was to just avoid them because you were probably in a pretty rough neighborhood. When everything is stripped of its identity in favor of clean or neutral designs, it creates a world that feels inhumane. This type of minimalism has broader cultural implications because it intentionally erases detail and character and history, often justified by cost-cutting measures mandated by public works and government entities that don't value creativity or design anymore. It's why most government buildings look like prisons even when they're not prisons. How is this not a prison? We end up slowly homogenizing public spaces and contributing to a lack of appreciation for craftsmanship. Some people argue that minimalism is actually more inclusive because it avoids divisive details or disagreements about taste. If you like ornate details,
yeah, the phone booth's cultural significance went away because we all got cell phones. Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think that the British did phone booth design correctly. They did it right. You know, come up with an iconic look. Boom. It reminds you of England. I do agree with him that, you know, companies could do a better job at creating more interesting designs for stuff. But at the same time, I don't want to throw minimalism under the bus.
Put them in your own home, as if that's not erasure, or that the cultural landscape we live in should be reduced to neutral, sterile spaces because someone might find the filigree and window molding difficult to clean, or the gargoyles on buildings too scary. Or too horny. I swear, if you showed these people the interior of a maximum security prison cell and told them it's $1 million minimalist home, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Minimalism prioritizes a dull, contemptuous functionality, stripping away any spark of joy or creativity that would be a step too far even for Marie Kondo. Minimalism is only inclusive in the sense that it alienates people from culture and insists that everyone look and think the same. It does.
No, it's just a way of looking and thinking. You know, if you're someone who just really doesn't like clutter, you just like cleanness, you like simplicity, you like nothing, you know, I'm a nihilist. I think minimalism is very appealing on that level. I like the simplicity of it. I like the fact that it doesn't ask anything of me. It's just like, no, get rid of everything. Make it all clean. There's something great about that. I think that Japanese house design is a really great example of minimalism, and that has character, that has history, that has personality, but it's also minimalist.
Doesn't account for class, religion, tradition, or race, and it often ends up serving only a few select demographics. Those damn coastal elites.
I like the irony of this guy with this background talking about interior design. Like, this guy is an expert on interior design. The guy in this room. He knows
the
what he's
idea that
talking
neutral
about.
or clean design is somehow more inclusive is an illusion. It's a design philosophy that is all too often weaponized to erase the rich diversity of society. These decisions, though often defended as economic or pragmatic, start to reflect the very roots of fascism. Bet you didn't think you'd get a lesson about fascism in a video on minimalism, did you?
I 100% expected it because your bread tubers are all so fucking predictable.
Fascism doesn't always appear as violence or people getting rounded up in the streets and put in internment camps. It can start with seemingly innocent decisions that favor uniformity over diversity. erasure over expression. It creeps into everyday life, stripping away character and turning our environments into controlled spaces without any sense of belonging or history, until we're all wearing gray jumpsuits working in an Orwellian labor camp after committing thought crime.
Le Corbusier was an extremely influential architect, product designer, and town planner. He was also a proven fascist. He stated that the house was a machine for living and compared them to industrial ships and automobiles. He was also fond of a theory called purism, which rejected adornment and loved the color white. Is it any surprise that he promoted an aesthetic style that called for cultural erasure, particularly culture from the global south? He loved ancient Greek columns. Is it any surprise that an aesthetic that calls for simple, clean lines was embraced by capitalists as it's perfect for mass production?
This clean slate becomes an authoritarian mandate to eradicate anything that doesn't conform to an imposed ideal of functionality or impossibly efficient perfection. Ultra minimal, brutalist.
But, like, it was also new and exciting and fun back then to do something, like, futuristic, and because nothing was minimalist back then. And they were kind of breaking new ground and experimenting, and it really was, it wasn't just a rejection of character. It was its own, finding character and meaning through the art of design. It was its own movement. So it's not as simple as saying that it was just one big attempt to sort of scour and cleanse society of any individuality.
Design can lead to social decay as well, which is actually not very efficient. Studies show that this kind of architecture leads to more vandalism, less appreciation, and an overall colder, less community-oriented society. People are less likely to treat their environment with care when the space they occupy feels devoid of meaning and is itself neglected, left to deteriorate. Why do you think every one of those old payphones were sticky and also tagged with graffiti or had the actual phone ripped out of the cord? This kind of minimalist design signals to the user that there was no care put into its creation, so what incentive is there that we care about its existence? The continued embrace of minimalism risks creating a world that's not only visually sterile, but emotionally detached, where culture stagnates. The responsibility to embrace more thoughtful design falls on us all as individuals, pushing for change and resisting the temptation to let soulless functionality dominate. There's a reductio ad absurdum of beautiful, comfortable, organic spaces like this to sad beige TikTok influencer mom homes like this. And this kind of thinking is how you end up bulldozing a beautiful glade to make room for houses like this to sad beige...
Okay, that's a bar. Comparing a bar to a living room is
beige TikTok influencer mom homes like...
I expected him to, like, show a trendy minimalist bar. That's what I expected.
This.
Yeah, I mean, look at that marble bench. That looks awful. Look at how it clashes with the wall. That's not great. Like, what is that pocket there? That corner behind the bench, but underneath the wall? Like, that looks unfinished. The curtains, these gray curtains, are not very appealing. The floor looks easy to clean. I like that. Yeah, they've got these, like, couches that look kind of... I don't know. Would these be comfortable? Because, like, these pillows... It looks like they just have 2 throw pillows and not any actual cushions for your back. So extended sitting on these couches wouldn't be very fun. Yeah, I mean, overall, there are issues with this design. I'm not a fan of that molding there. Like, a lot of this is just not very good design. I don't think it's necessarily the minimalism that's to blame for it. Comparatively, this is more appealing. I will give him that, even though it's a totally different function. It's a bar. So it's not playing the same function as the living room there, but yeah.
A Walmart supercenter. We can all agree nature is beautiful, not because it's clean and grows in perfectly straight lines, but because it's messy and alive and vibrant. Nature is the original maximalist designer, and it's actually more organized than it appears, or what a minimalist could ever come up with. Not everything that looks disorganized actually is. Look, I'm not saying everything should be a maximalist Cracker Barrel of...
Nature is not organized, my friend. It is the opposite of organized. Yeah, it's a nice looking bar, I guess.
Random junk nailed to the walls or distracting over-designed telephone poles or anything. Just like add a little bit of character. Maximalism is often dismissed as being chaotic or busy, but there's a fundamental truth about maximalist design that makes it compelling, at least. You might be overwhelmed walking into a maximalist space, but you might also feel like you've stepped into a world that has...
I'll admit I was wrong. His explanation wasn't capitalism, it was actually fascism. Honestly, you could make a stronger argument that it's because of capitalism than whatever the fuck he's saying. He is bringing the capitalist thing into it, but yeah.
Something, anything to say, as opposed to entering what feels like Patrick Bateman's kill room. Even he had pictures hanging on his walls, for God's sake. Living like this isn't even practical. Calling minimalism practical is just an excuse for poor design by people without taste. How is it any more practical than being a hoarder who can't find their pots and pans under all their old newspapers they've collected? At least they own pots and pans.
These people own pots and pans too. So, I mean, you can do a lot with very little. If you have pots and pans... you have stuff to eat on. Like, what do you need? Most of the stuff that people have in their house is stuff that they don't actually need.
They might be mismatched, but they have them. Minimalist designs are touted as being easier to clean, cheaper, and more functional, which may be true in some cases, but again, at what cost? In the case of minimalist car design, like the Cybertruck, a monument to minimalist overcompensation, it could mean getting you and your whole family killed because...
I mean, calling the Cybertruck minimalist is a little bit weird. It doesn't look any more minimalist than any other car. In fact, it's so huge that it's kind of ironic to call it minimalist. It seems like they maximized whatever they could do with that design by making it as gigantic and gaudy as possible.
Sometimes minimalism isn't actually the better option. You see, Elon thought it was a good idea to daisy chain every electronic control together on what is essentially the same wire in the car. He saved a lot in copper wiring in exchange for the entire car losing power when you blow a speaker. On normal cars, everything has a separate bus or switch, so when the windshield wipers lose power, you can still at least turn on your emergency lights and drive the fucking thing home. So the argument that minimalism is somehow...
That's not really minimalism. That's not like an aesthetic design philosophy. That's just bad electronic design. Like, you could design a car with the exact same aesthetic as the Cybertruck and not do something stupid like that with it. So, like, don't blame minimalism for that. Blame Elon Musk being a shithead.
More efficient is scientifically inaccurate. Even when cars don't have the resolution of a PS1 video game, they all look like a robot's chode. I'm not a car guy by any means, but cars used to be bad fucking ass. Or at the very least, unique. The Dodge Challenger, the Lincoln Continental, the AMC Pacer.
No, pretty much all of those cars look like every other car from back in the day. You know, like cars, sorry to say this, but they don't look very unique. Actually, the one thing I will give the Cybertruck, if you're going to make this argument, I mean, come on, like, look at the Cybertruck. The Cybertruck looks way more unique and interesting than any other car ever. Maybe since the DeLorean, you know? So, I don't agree with this argument at all. Like, none of these cars look unique.
And the Ford fucking Bronco.
These all look so generic. They look like every other car ever. Look at the Cybertruck. That's a new looking car. That's an interesting looking car.
Modern cars all look AI generated, where the only design suggestions were that they must include the necessary components required to legally be able to call them a car. These boring, uninspired electric razors on wheels,
except for the Cybertruck, which looks totally different,
line our streets now against a brutalist cityscape populated with even more ugly, gray, totalitarian
back in my day, but make it woke. Yeah, that's what this is.
Utilities and buildings devoid of any depth of character, and it drives me fucking crazy. To extend an olive branch, thoughtful minimalism can be beautiful, but it's the ultra minimalism that turns.
Also, you have to keep in mind the fact that a lot of the changes in car design were just to make them more aerodynamic so that they're more fuel efficient, which is good for the planet and also good for your wallet.
Environments into creepy corporate spaces.
You know those towns that have such a weird, unsettling vibe because they're super corporate and it's nothing but like apartment buildings and then a bunch of like random generic restaurants, like a random salad store inside of an apartment building, in Orange Theory, a random French bistro and like a random Mexican restaurant. And then there's just like nothing but buildings that all look the same.
Compare a beautifully crafted lamppost that was still probably able to be mass-produced and relatively affordable to a uniform steel pole. The former invites at least some level of admiration or contemplation, while the latter just exists. The real danger lies in over-applying minimalism to everything, especially in public spaces where people frequent. These things.
Most of the design changes in cars were to account for National Transportation Safety Board standards. I know, especially like if you look at steering wheels, they're a lot fatter so that they're safer if you collide with a steering wheel in a wreck. Also, they got rid of the third seating spot at the front of a car. They used to be able to have sex in a car. You know, you can't really do that anymore. Unless you do it the way they did it in that movie at Rita and Sue and Bob 2, where they're doing it over the console.
Shape our experience of the world even subconsciously, and when they become mere functional objects, they take away from the vibrancy of daily life. And for those defending minimalism, you're defending capitalist-driven design whose banality bolsters authoritarianism. Beauty comes from time, energy, and intention, and when artists and architects and designers are given the space to create beauty and meaning, even in simple things like lampposts and benches or street signs, it encourages not just creativity, but a deeper appreciation in everyone who interacts with those objects, even passively. The time and care put into creating such objects, rather than them simply being extruded by a machine in a factory half a world away, have a ripple effect on society and culture. It encourages us to value craftsmanship and slows people down to appreciate their surroundings rather than rush.
It's interesting that pretty much all of the examples that this guy has given have been examples of old pre-modern design, like, or stuff that's not trying to be like trendy and innovative. Like I would like to see this guy's take on a modern art museum, because most of modern art is often defended by kind of left-wing people like this, but a lot of it does kind of look aesthetically ugly and minimalist, and there are things about it that I can compare to what he's talking about here. So I'm curious what his take would be on that.
Through a world designed purely for functionality that assumes an individual's value is not in their ability to also create something unique or appreciate art and design, but by how much labor they can produce. You don't have time to stop and smell the roses or admire that architecture. You have to maximize shareholder value from a concrete box for a company that pays you 1/500th what the CEO makes. Now get back to work, you cog! When we vacation, we visit places with ancient history or deep cultural identity to experience that culture of a different society and the craftsmanship of other peoples. You don't go to Iowa to behold the majesty of the aluminum siding on a strip mall. We want to marvel at the beauty of antiquity and art made by thoughtful and provocative artists and designers. These structures act as sparks of divinity, reminding us what humanity can achieve when inspired and how unique a species we are, even if it's applied to something as simple and mundane as a doorbell. We're often told that happiness comes from appreciating the small things, but in a minimalist world where everything is underwhelming and mundane, what is there to appreciate? Take a look at the right angles on that doorbell. Woo-wee! Minimalist designs that prioritize function over beauty strip away these moments of awe and presence, making it harder to feel connected to the world around us. A society that favors ultra-minimalism may save money, but in doing so loses its connection to creativity, history, and culture. Unfortunately, convincing the Department of Lampposts and Bollards to redesign their lampposts and bollards...
He added a LaCroix can. I don't think that was there before, was it? Yeah, it wasn't there before. Earlier in the video, no LaCroix. Now, boom, LaCroix.
Is not really a priority nowadays, and eventually every new neighborhood is going to be a bunch of uneven cube apartment buildings stacked on top of a Whole Foods. The charm of...
I love leftist YouTubers because they're always deeply convinced that what they're saying is deeply profound while saying absolutely nothing unique or insightful at all. Yeah, kind of.
Pre-modern cathedrals and opera houses and cars and packaging and products is being eroded by efficient, functional, minimalist design, and it bums me out every time I go outside to run errands in one of these corporate plazas. I really wish there was a better ending to this video than everything is ugly and I hate it here. I guess a call to action is, if you can't afford to buy something like a house, please, for the love of God, don't strip the character out of it, and definitely don't take design tips from two guys who decorated their homes like a hospital waiting room. There's enough fascism in the world already, so let's not allow it to invade our public and private spaces either in the name of efficient and practical design. That's the video. Thanks so much for sticking around. If you made it this far, that means you're special.
I think we should do the opposite of what this guy says. I think we should strip away everything. Leave nothing left. We should cleanse the earth. We should scour the earth. Destroy, level, burn. Slash and burn. Nobody watching BreadTube can afford a house. TF is this guy talking about? Yeah. What's this guy talking about? Yeah. Way to go. That's the last video for today. Put my earbuds away. Yeah. That reminds me of Nostalgia Critic talking about Super Mario Brothers Super Show. Yeah. Mate. Isn't that weird how James called Mike Mate in his book? I'm pretty sure in that book he just calls him Mate. He doesn't call him Mike. I don't get it. Why doesn't he call him Mike? All right, well, I think that's it. I don't want to stream too long, so I think